Let's get into some shite. Hi, folks. Welcome to the Outta Toon Podcast. Thanks for hanging out with me. You know what? Today, it's a special kind of podcast. Triple digits. That's right. 100th episode of the Outta Toon Podcast. I'm kind of happy about it. I haven't done too many things that have lasted 100 times. I don't even know what I have done that I've committed that long. And I decided, I wanted to do something special for the podcast. And you got to think about, do I want to just play a bunch of classics and rehash some of the old stuff? No. You know why? Because that means I have to go back and listen to it. I'm not going to do that. So I thought, well, what can I do? And then I thought, well, I know. Maybe, what if I have a special guest? What if I invite somebody to come in and be a special guest for the show? Can I do that? Because I haven't had a lot of special guests on the podcast. It's just kind of been me whining and making stuff up. And so that was what I thought. I thought, I'll do that. I'll get a special guest. Well, here's the thing. I kind of knew immediately what special guests I wanted to get, but I didn't know if the special guest would be available. And so I had to kind of see if I could make it happen. And I reached out, and the special guest kind of said they would be interested in doing it. So that's a good thing, right? And then it kept being okay if things were. And then now here we are, and the special guest is sitting right here in the studio. So it did work. Now, here's the thing. Let's see if you know the special guest by the special guest's voice. Special guest, how about maybe saying something to the people out there?
Hello, people out in the world.
Do you know who that special guest is? All right. So here's the thing. If you've listened to my past podcast, you know who this special guest is. If you've never listened to my past podcast, you don't know who this special guest is. At least not yet. So I'm just going to tell you, my special guest, 100th episode of the Outta Toon Podcast, Cheri Brown. My podcast partner since 2013.
Yes.
Holy crap.
In
Chattanooga. Right. We started in Chattanooga.
That's right.
Do you remember?
I do.
We were living in that house.
It was actually in Uruguay.
Yeah. And that's kind of a cool house. I went by that house and a tornado went through. And
that's what you said.
Tore some stuff up.
Yeah.
But when we were there, I think we were the tornado.
We were the tornado.
We were pretty good, though. But I just remember we started the podcast, and we didn't know what we were doing. We were kind of figuring it out as we went along. But I think we liked it. And then our kind of relationship started, we never hated each other. We never punched each other. But we just kind of was like, I'm tired of you. Get out of my face. And so we didn't do we did, I want to say 6 episodes of the Life and Kilt podcast. And then the 7th episode I did by myself, and that was horrible.
Awful.
And then I stopped it. And then we started again once we all moved to Atlanta. And we did that for a year and a half. And then we changed it to This Epic Disaster. That was a good podcast.
That was a great podcast.
I had fun on that podcast. And we did that for almost 2 years, right?
Yes. Over 2 years.
2 years of foolishness. I was thinking about the other day. And we did a lot of good episodes, I like. But one of my favorite episodes is so stupid.
Which one?
The April Fool episode where we pretended like someone came up and killed us.
That's one of your favorite episodes?
The last 20 minutes of the episode was just the theme song playing. Like we were laying there dead. We just let it run. I love that stupidity. That was so much fun. But yeah, I don't know how you judge stupidity. We did a lot of stupid stuff.
We did a lot of stupid stuff.
And then, do you know, it's been almost 2 years ago since you've sat at a podcast mic.
That's true.
Because
that's true.
For 1 year, and we'll talk about it. 1 year, we didn't talk.
We didn't speak at all.
No, and
That's
then this past year, I guess, I think it was like in December, we started kind of, I don't know, we had a few emails, and then we got together in December, hung out a little bit, which was fun, and then we've been okay since. And but you personally haven't podcasted since then. But I wanted you on the show just because it's 100th episode, even though you have nothing to do with this podcast.
Nothing at all.
Nothing to do with the Outta Toon Podcast.
There's no reason I'm a special guest.
At the same time, you do, because I learned to podcast with us podcasting.
True.
And
I taught you everything you know.
Pretty much. And a lot of people don't know this, and you and I have talked about it, and I've talked about it with other people. It's hard, difficult to do a podcast by yourself. A solo podcast
Yes.
It's a whole different monkey.
Yes.
And I've been monkeying with it for 100 episodes now. This podcast started out with the name Apocalyptic, which I liked. And I still like the name. I'm going to figure out a way to use it. But no one could figure out the name.
Yeah.
And when you tried to type it in to find the podcast, Google always wanted to correct it to apocalyptic. And once you do, you can't find the podcast because this is not
Yeah.
So I learned, don't intentionally misspell something when you're trying to start a podcast. So I changed the name to a name that's intentionally misspelled, Outta Toon, which some people
still don't get.
But the thing is, Outta Toon I've had for over half my life, since I was in my late 20s.
Yes.
And it has a little more presence online, so it's a little easier to find.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. But what happens when they look up Outta Toon and then get your old cartoon strip?
I think that they don't. That's been a long time ago, and I don't think that I don't think it's connected to that anymore. There's a band called Outta Toon.
Is there?
And it's spelled the same way, and I think they wanted my URL
for a while.
Long time.
I bet so.
They're like, I wish whoever's got that, I wish they'd release it. And then when I started the podcast, I know that they were like, dang it.
Somebody's actually
we're not gonna get
using it.
Yeah, I thought about trying to get one of them on the show.
Yeah, do it.
I think I should. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got here. And I've really enjoyed solo podcasting. It's different. It's not for everybody. Even an audience is not, if you're an audience listening to it, it's not for everybody. One person droning on about something is not always fun.
Gets a little old.
Sometimes it's okay. And I know just from my standpoint, I have shows that are better than other times. I know it. Mm-hmm. And I think the best shows when you're doing a solo podcast, the best shows are the shortest. So I try to keep it under 30 minutes. 20 minutes is good.
Okay.
You know, if I could do a show 15, 20 minutes, it's nice. You could put that in, listen to it really quick, maybe even listen to 2 episodes if you want. But I don't know. It's been a task. It's been a learning process for me. And I feel like I've learned a lot. I've learned how to solo podcast. And I try to keep it interesting.
Okay.
It might not always be. But I think it's okay.
Well, I have a confession to make. I've never listened to an episode of your Outta Toon podcast.
You said you've heard a couple of them.
The first couple.
The first couple sucked.
That's right. So that's why I stopped.
I think the later ones are better. And basically, you just, for me anyway, it's just like learning. I learned to talk to myself. Mm-hmm. Well, I do that anyway. I mean, so I don't think you know this about me. But I have had a job where I've had to travel like 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. And I used to have this habit of when I got in my car for hours, just doing characters, doing a monologue, just talking crap. Now, everybody does that, right? I'm not the only one. Everybody does that. You just talk out loud. You do stuff.
I talk to myself all the time.
But improving, just doing comedy.
Yes.
Just describing what's going on outside your car window. So it's a lot like that, but you put it on a microphone and you record it.
Okay.
And you hope other people will listen to it, which is different because I don't want anybody to hear what I say in my car.
No. That's like narrating your bathroom time.
Well, I do that.
Do you?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I've learned to do. I think I've learned to do it pretty good. Now I've listened to other solo podcasts. I don't know how to judge, but I think I do an okay job. You know, and again, solo podcasts aren't for everyone. I think so. I made a commitment. This is kind of what's different from the podcast that we've done in the past. I didn't want to do the beer reviews, even though that was fun. I didn't want to do things where I kind of rehashed podcasts that we have done, you and I have done.
That makes sense.
So I wanted to do different things, and I have put. I'm bleeding. I have put news on the podcast, like weird news and stuff. So, but that's just fun. You know, that's not really what we do. I purposely wanted to make the podcast clean, which is easy to do, not having you sit there.
That's true. I mean, with me on a podcast, you're bound to have to hit the explicit button.
You have a potty mouth, and the potty doesn't mean podcast.
That's true.
So, I remember early on when we switched, you know, when we did Life in a Kilt podcast, we tried to keep it pretty clean.
We tried to, yeah.
And then as soon as we changed to This Epic Disaster, we did not. And I remember one of our listeners was like, I can't listen to this anymore because I can't listen to the language. That's okay.
That's okay.
That's
not
fine.
For everybody.
I know the only person who's really talked with a potty mouth on this show has been a pastor. He knows who I'm talking about.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
He said choice words on here.
Choice words.
Yeah.
Okay. Not just your regular words.
Yeah.
But choice words.
Words that I didn't change to explicit, but I could have. It wasn't like filthy. It wasn't really dirty.
It wasn't like me.
No.
Okay.
And I've done that, and I've tried to keep it shorter. But I think I've kept kind of the same thing. I've tried to make it entertaining, you know, and I've injected a little bit of seriousness in it. I feel like we did that on our show.
Once in a while.
Yeah. But I try to do, I try occasionally to get into some like life and spiritual kind of discussions. Is it discussions? No, a monologue. Discussion with myself.
You can have a discussion with yourself. I have them every day.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. But I feel like the model's kind of the same. I'll tell you the model, and this is a secret. I don't think I've said this out loud to most people.
Okay.
So when we first started podcasting, I like to have a model. I'm kind of like, let's see so morning radio.
Yes.
If you listen to the radio station, that was kind of my model. And there's a podcast that I love called Fun Employment Radio, which the people on that show did morning radio.
Yeah.
And so their podcast was very similar to what I wanted to do. And early on, that was kind of the model that I used for us. Mm-hmm. And so when I was doing the solo, I was like, I need a model. What am I going to do? Because it's hard to find solo podcasts, and especially ones that are trying to be entertaining. Like you could find a solo podcast that's about business.
Oh, yes.
Like that.
Yes.
And so I wanted entertainment. So the model that I used for my show, if you ever listen to WTF with Mark Maron, at the very, very beginning of his podcast, he does a monologue.
Okay.
Sometimes it's 2-3 minutes. Sometimes it might be 10. I don't know if he's done 15. Maybe he has. But that was my inspiration. I was just like, I love that little monologue that he does where he's just talking to himself.
Okay.
And I was like, that's going to be
your entire podcast.
That's my model. That's my inspiration.
Okay.
And so, of course, I don't copy that. I mean, you can't. It's him talking. But I just liked it. It was free. It was talking about things he was interested in. And I was just like, that's what I'm going to do. And so that's where that came from.
Got you. Okay. Well, again, I haven't listened to an episode since the first
probably
couple.
Won't.
And I probably won't.
Well, let me just tell you, no one else has either.
Oh, I didn't think so. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I didn't think so. They probably listened to the episodes they were interviewed on, but I don't think that they would listen to anything else.
Well, okay. So question now for me, have you thought about doing a podcast again?
I have. I've considered...
I'm not making you I'm not asking for a commitment.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I've considered multiple different options, and honestly, I thought about doing a 5 to 10 minute, like 2 to 3 times a week podcast.
That would be good.
And it would be short and sweet.
Those are great, though. But people download them. They can listen to them really quick, like before anything. I mean, even when you're traveling, you can.
Yeah. I'm just trying to decide on the subject matter.
Yeah.
And I've gone from ideas about having everything possible as the subject matter,
Which is not bad.
Yeah. And having only one specific subject. And that right there scares me a little bit, because we tried that with our Life in a Kilt podcast, and you can only talk about kilts so much. Now, this would be something a little more progressive, and by progressive I mean it would progress because it would be me.
Yeah.
And it would be ongoing. It wouldn't be just, look at this kilt and this kilt. And this, it would be about my process. If that makes sense.
Okay.
And
your ideas, your thoughts.
Correct.
Your point of view.
Correct.
But that's exactly what this show is, except it's mine.
Except it's yours. And so that's an option as well. I've considered doing something with a partner again at some point, but I'm not available, like physically, mentally, and emotionally available right now for anything like that.
Okay.
I've been going through a little bit of stuff, and I'm not going to overextend myself in any possible way right now.
But too, I mean, in a weird way, and having a partner, it's in some ways it's like a marriage. I mean, even if it's not, so we work because we knew each other pretty well, and then we continued to play on a friendship. But I don't know if I did an interview with a guy, and I take that back. I said I had 2 interviews, but no, that was an in-person interview. Okay. So I interviewed a guy, an artist on the show several episodes ago, and it went really well. And we had a good kind of a in-person rapport where we could I think we could do a podcast together.
Okay.
In some ways, I think so. But I don't know, like if you're doing a bunch of them, maybe 1 or 2 works. And then after a while, so you and I kind of got to a point where we sort of, I've had my wife on the show.
Yes.
And this is not a slam against her, but we couldn't do a podcast together. We just don't have the rhythm. We don't have the timing back and forth. I like for her to pop in every once in a while.
Yes.
But I don't think we could co-host one together.
Right.
But you and I kind of learned how to do that. So even now, I find myself what we're doing right now, that rhythm. You just kind of like when someone talks, you stop. When the other person start, you go back and forth. You learn that kind of thing. You learn how to feed lines to someone. You learn how, and that's something that takes a while.
It does.
You just don't pick it up.
It is a learned skill. It is not something you're born with. Some people are naturally more conversational than others, just because of their personality. But again, having a conversation that is actually being recorded and listened to, that is a learned skill. And you and I learned it by trial by fire. I mean, we just kind of threw ourselves in and did it. And we didn't, I didn't anyways, read any books or look at any YouTube videos or anything like that.
I don't think we knew. I don't think we knew we were learning it. We just did. We learned by doing it. And there were podcasts where we just didn't click. I know those. But for the most part, I think we kind of, especially as we started getting into this epic disaster, which is kind of ironic because the disasters were the first ones, and this epic disaster kind of where we got a little bit better.
Got better, yeah. So let me ask you this. So this is 100.
Yeah, 100.
100. And how often do you do your podcast?
So originally I was doing them 2 a week. And then recently it's been 1 a week, although very recently, like I've had some commitments and just things changing, whatever. And I'll get one every week and a half. And I'm trying to get back to every week because it should be every week. Every Monday is when I'm trying to put one out.
I see.
And then I always wanted to kind of reserve Thursdays because I was doing, originally it was Monday and Thursday. And then I kind of want to get back to that schedule and do Monday and Thursday, but I'm just not sure I have enough listeners to do a Monday and a Thursday. That was the other problem. It's just like content. That's a lot of content.
That's a lot of content.
A Monday and a Thursday. So,
yeah.
But I was making them shorter, and I just like, it's like if I can commit and keep the commitment to the Mondays, just keep the Mondays going, and then every once in a while, if I want to throw a Thursday in, I can. Just however I feel.
Special episode.
Totally. Yeah. A very special Outta Toon podcast.
A very special. Very special.
Hey, you know what? I just saw this the other day.
Special.
So there was a list of sitcoms. I don't know if I can remember all of them, where only one person is still living.
In the sitcom.
Yeah. So like Gilligan's Island. Okay,
so like in reality,
yes.
One person's still living.
Yeah, right. Oh,
okay.
Now. So Gilligan's Island.
Uh-huh.
This is really bad because I'm not going to be able to remember all of them, but there was a bunch of them. Different strokes. Like Willis is the only one left.
Really?
I have a theory that Willis did them all in. So he could live in the mansion alone.
By himself.
Yes.
You're probably right.
That's what I'm thinking. But there was now I can't even remember, and it's going to kind of drive me nuts, but there were 10, I'm sure, episodes, sitcoms, where just one person is left.
Interesting. You know what I would find interesting is, because I watch a lot of, I don't want to call them cop shows, but they're like
true crime.
True crime.
Mm-hmm.
But fiction. Those shows too. Like I'll name a couple: NCIS, Criminal Minds.
Okay.
Things like that.
Yeah.
So dramas, operational dramas, I think, or department, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in those shows, especially the ones that have 10 plus seasons, you will find that from the beginning of the show until when the show finally finishes.
Oh, there's only like one original person?
The cast has completely changed.
Yeah.
And the only thing remaining the same is the premise of the show. And sometimes there'll be one person left, but sometimes you can even get it to the point where nobody's left from the beginning of the show. And I just think that's like, if you were an actor and you started on a show, and then you spent, let's say, 10 years on this show, and finally you're like, I've got other opportunities, I'm leaving. And then the show went on for another 10 years. How would you feel about the show going on that long without you?
I would be, I don't know. I think I would be okay with it. It's usually an ensemble anyway.
Yes,
right?
Normally.
So I think I'd be okay if the ratings dipped a little bit. Be like, yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That actually happened on one of those shows.
Yeah.
And the actor came back.
Well, you think about it, like MASH, a couple of people quit, and I think the show got better after they quit.
Yeah.
So like when McLean Stevenson quit, and then Harry Morgan took his place, and then Larry Linville quit. See, I know these people's names. And
That's
David
so
Ogden
weird.
Stiers kind of took his place. I feel like MASH, the quality got better. It really became a different type of sitcom, though.
Yes, it did.
Beverly Hillbillies. Only one person left.
Did you just look that up on your phone?
I just looked it up on my phone. Some of these, because some of these is Hogan's Heroes, but I don't even know that that's true anymore. But they also say Golden Girls, but all the Golden Girls are now dead.
All of them?
Gone. Yeah, they're all gone.
Betty was the last one.
She was the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Golden Girls are all gone. Bye, Betty.
Bye, Betty. We'll miss you. Really, we will.
Yeah. And like kind of like the, well, I don't know. This is a podcast, so it's not the same thing.
What?
I was just kidding. Oh, there's one person left.
There's one person
on the
left.
podcast. There's a whole new podcast. If I was doing This Epic Disaster by myself,
it would be a disaster.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be a disaster, yeah.
A complete disaster. People told me that the only reason they listened to that show was
because of you.
Because of me.
I know. I know all of the people say that. I don't know anybody listen to me.
Well, you have your own podcast and you have listeners.
No, I don't have any listeners.
I
no
don't
one
believe
listens.
that.
I'm the only one who listens to the podcast. Listen to this.
I'm listening.
We have a listener line, 678-348-0008. People can call that line, leave a message, and I'll put it on the podcast.
Oh, okay.
I make them famous. Or they could text it and I'll read their text.
Okay.
That line has been in existence since the beginning of time, since the beginning of the podcast. You know how many people have called and left a message?
How many?
None. No one.
In 100 episodes, no one has done it?
We have had some people text it, though, I will say.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's there. And see, that's the thing.
I wonder if I should do it right now.
No, do it later. Disguise your voice. Say you're my mom and I need to quit doing the podcast.
Stop doing the podcast,
You're
Ricky.
embarrassing your family. Yeah, I mean, I just thought that would be, I thought about taking it out, but why? It doesn't cost me anything. It's just like in case somebody wants to some point. I just like the idea. So I used to listen to a podcast. I don't remember the name of the podcast, but at the end of the podcast, they would play like 10, 11, 12 messages that people would leave. They were so weird.
Yes.
And I just thought that would be kind of fun.
Okay,
But you do have to have listeners in order for that to work.
So here's a test.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening, please do me a favor.
Oh, no.
And call
That's
the
embarrassing.
number so that Rick gets a voicemail from you.
That's embarrassing. If you... All right, what's your life lessons? What are you learning today? What's going on? You haven't done a podcast for 2 years. What do you got to teach people? What do you got to say?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. You haven't learned anything. In 2
Nothing
years.
at all. No, I've been through a lot in the last 2 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just medical, physical, emotional, mental changes, situation changes, life situation changes, just the whole spiel. The only thing that remains the same in my life right now is where I live.
Yeah.
And my animals.
You're going to change any of that soon? I mean, you can't do anything about the animals, I don't think. You're not going to change your animals. But I mean, are you going to move?
No, I don't plan to. I don't want to. I love where I live. Like, I full on love it.
Yeah, I like where I live.
And I don't want to ever move. I honestly, I would, and I rent. Yeah. And I would rent that place for the rest of my life.
That's not, I mean, that's kind of a good thing because, like, if you owned it, then you got to do something. You don't have kids.
Right.
What are you going to do?
Right.
Where's your house going to go?
Yeah.
Who's going to get it? Who are you leaving it to?
Yeah.
And you just stop paying rent.
Stop paying rent.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've lived there longer by double than I've lived anywhere in my life.
Yeah, but
even as a child.
As you get older, though, you start. You grow more roots as you get older, generally.
Generally, yeah. Yes. And what I've found with those roots comes accumulation of things.
You've never liked that, but I'm okay with it, as you can see from my studio.
Yeah, you like to accumulate things.
I don't know that I like to. I just do. It's just from being a person.
My house right now, I could purge it and probably get rid of half of the things. And by things, I just mean things.
Yeah.
You know, like things people give you. Don't give me things.
Right.
I have enough things.
I'm trying to do that now. That's one of the things that's come with age is I'm much more willing to get rid of stuff. So one of the reasons that stuff's everywhere is because I'm actually seriously trying to get rid of it.
Right.
And I was saying, I think before we went on the air, it's just like I've lost some motivation for things. Mm-hmm. One of the motivations is to collect things. There's certain things that I just don't have attachments to anymore that I'm willing to kind of get rid of. And the little storage areas, I'm like, okay, I got to tackle that. And you get in there and you're like, I don't need that. I don't need that. And you throw it away. So it's just a little at a time. I'm getting rid of stuff. Just kind of tossing.
I've been throwing around the thought of moving in my head a little bit over the past few months.
So like moving to a new house or a location entirely?
New location entirely.
Okay.
And that comes along with job hunting, which is something I'm doing right now.
Okay.
So, because you'll find a great job and you'll be like, oh, that's over, that's like in a different state, and that's going to suck. You can't do that unless it's 100% remote or you only have to be there, say, once every quarter or something. That's great. I can do that travel. That's fine. But, some of these places, it's like, if I lived there, that would be my perfect job.
Right.
And then you start thinking, could I live there? And then my brain goes to, okay, how do I get moved if I have to move.
Yeah.
And so I start looking at my house, and then of course I have an anxiety attack. And then once that's over, I look at things, and it's funny, the things that I want to keep. Like, I remember when I moved to Chattanooga.
Yeah.
The very first time.
You had a suitcase and 2 cats.
And yes, with me. And then, and all my stuff showed up.
Oh, yeah, you did send. I remember that. Yeah.
I had a total of like 12 boxes, and 4 of them were books.
Yeah.
Why did I ship books?
I'm kind of a book person.
But that's me now, too. Even still, I have my bookcase, and I'm like, I don't want to get rid of any of these books.
My wife's like, get rid of your books. I'm like, no.
I don't want to. and then when I did, because you and I accumulated a lot of books. One of our favorite things to do used to be go to the used bookstore.
Okay, yeah.
And when we finally purged all those books, do you remember we had like buckets and buckets of books?
Yeah.
I was fine with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the attachment is, but I definitely have an attachment to books.
I do too. I've always had an attachment to books. I don't like getting rid of books, and books to me are also, they kind of mark certain era of your life. So like I was a theater major.
Yes.
And I used to do theater. I haven't done theater in a long time, and I don't really want to ever again, but I don't want to get rid of my theater books. And when I look at them, they kind of remind me of back when I did theater.
So they're sentimental.
There's a certain amount of sentimental value to them. It's just like, this was something that I used to like back during that time. It's almost like a little mark of your ego. I mean, when I'm saying ego, I'm talking about who you pretend to be.
Who you are, yeah.
So it's just like, I used to be theater guy.
Yes.
I used to be stand-up comedy guy.
Yes.
I used to be this guy. So it's just like, there's a little progression. And I could go back to those books and go, oh, this was my favorite book when I did stand-up, and I used to get so much information from that.
Would you call that nostalgic?
It's a part of it is nostalgic, but I don't know. I find nostalgic more of a worship of the past.
I see. Okay.
People who, I don't know. It's almost like a fetish. It's
like all you want to do is talk about the past?
Do you know people like that?
I do.
I do. It's so irritating. There's nothing wrong with going, hey, do you remember that time we did this when we were in college? And go, oh, yeah, that was kind of fun. Yeah, I like that. But then there are some people who just do nothing but talk about when they were in college. It's like, do you not have a life now?
Yeah.
What's going on now?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sometimes I find myself digging into the past and bringing people with me. And those people finally have to say, Cheri, it's not that time anymore.
Yeah.
That's not happening. And I'll tell you what my issue is, and I know other people like this as well, is I've got a little bit of PTSD from the past.
Okay.
And I find myself, as soon as I start thinking about the past or a specific situation, it's like, for me, it's not like, oh yeah, that was fun, and then move on, or oh yeah, that kind of sucked, that happened, and then move on, which is the healthy thing to do, especially with bad experiences. Is yes, that happened, recognize it, and move on. Right? I end up living in that moment until somebody drags me out of it.
That sucks.
It does suck, and it's part of having PTSD. Is you find yourself, as soon as somebody triggers that memory, you're in it again. You are right back in it. There's no, you can't. It's hard to get pulled back out, and there are tools to pull yourself out.
Right. They
take a lot of learning, definitely a learned skill that a licensed therapist can teach you. But, it's tough, and people don't understand that. So when they get tired of me sitting and talking about the past, they don't understand that I'm actually there. Yeah. And so, sometimes there's a disconnect there, but I do like it when people are honest with me and say, Cheri, that's enough. Do we really have to talk about the past anymore? Can we stop? Can we move forward? And I appreciate that when people do that.
Well, the way I look at it is, in the past, when things were happening in the past, like when I was in college, I was present.
Right.
I was in the moment. I was in the now.
You were living it.
And so I wasn't thinking about the past. It was just, this is going on now. And so now this is going on now.
Yes.
So even if I'm thinking about what happened in college, I'm out of the now. I'm in my mind. I'm in the mental thing. So even if I'm remembering what was the now then,
you're going to confuse people.
Yeah. It was clean. It was open. It was just being who you are, and you were experiencing that. And then when you get into a point where you're remembering that, it's all just mental stuff.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that, I don't feel like. But there's also a cleanness about it in that when you're remembering things, you generally only remember the funny, the good, the sparkly, clean, happy parts of it. Even if you're remembering something bad that happens, you've got a distance between you, so you could kind of be like, oh, remember when we all went out and the cops busted us and we all got put in jail? Ha 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 ha. That's funny. But then if you think about when you were going through it, there's probably a lot of terror and a lot of anxiety that was involved that you're kind of leaving out when you remember it. And so that to me is the problem I have with nostalgia, is it's usually a cleaned up version. It's a distorted version.
And you just proved my point about PTSD. Is with PTSD, when you remember that moment, when I say you're in it, that terror and that anxiety is there as well.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between just remembering something that happened in the past and living in the past. And for me, so yeah, that's something that I've been going through. You know, it's funny because I spend a lot of time alone. I'm not isolating myself per se, but I do spend a lot of time alone. I live alone. Mm-hmm. I have my animals to talk to.
Sure.
I have myself to talk to, which I do all the time. But you know, I do find myself even kind of going back in time in my head. As soon as I find myself doing that, if I recognize it in time, I stop it and I go and I do something like right now. I'm going to do this right now. Like I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to dive into something else, because that's my only escape from the past. Mm-hmm. Now, there are better tools than that. That's an escapism. But, you know, it is what it is. It's a learning experience. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to start talking about on that podcast that I had mentioned.
Yeah.
The 5 to 10 minutes a few times a week is just to kind of show my progress there. But it's not ready to happen yet.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I want to talk about something specific.
Something specific? So this is already your longest episode.
No. I did one. Most of my interview episodes do last longer, though.
Okay.
But I think my longest one, I don't know if I've done one over an hour. I might have. But I think in 40, I think it was like 48, 49 minutes was probably the longest one I've done by myself.
Wow.
Yeah, no one listened to that one.
You don't know that.
I don't. That's another thing. I will kind of glance at numbers occasionally, but I'm not interested in numbers. I've thought about it recently. I've just been like, should I quit doing this? I don't even know. Is there enough people listen that I should quit? And I just thought, no, because I don't care.
That's not why you do it.
I'm not doing this for numbers. And who knows? Someone might listen to this and think, oh, this is a great podcast, and put it on. And then all of a sudden I have 100,000 listeners, and it could be the worst scenario ever.
It could be.
And I just like, just having listeners, not necessarily a good thing. So just as long as I'm having fun doing what I'm doing, that I don't care. I would love for people to listen and enjoy it, because that's why you do things as an artist, is to give to people and hopefully something that they enjoy. So that's what I would like to think. But if 5 people listen and enjoy it, is that enough? Do I need 105? Do I need 5,000? Do I need 5 million? I don't know. I just as long as I'm still, and there have been times when I've thought, oh, that show sucked, I need to stop. and then I'll do another show and I'll be like, well, that one was fun.
Yeah.
So
I think every person in every career has had that moment.
Yeah.
Like, if you're writing grants, you could say that grant sucked.
Yeah.
That's why we didn't get it. I should stop.
Yeah.
Or if you're, anything.
Yeah.
So that's just common. But I can even say between when you and I were doing this epic disaster, the only reason I did that podcast was because I enjoyed doing the podcast.
Totally.
And I enjoyed spending time with you.
That was the only reason we ever did it.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
I didn't care about the KPIs. I wasn't worried about the metrics. I wasn't worried about...
I couldn't tell you what they were.
Yeah.
I didn't know what they were.
No, me either.
It was just creating and having fun. And I could still do that with even if I ever did another podcast, if I did a duo, if I did a panel or whatever, I really enjoy the solo.
Do you?
It's not an ego thing. I enjoy the flow. I enjoy the feeling. It's a lot like improv. There's kind of a tight wire thing about it. It's just like, am I going to fall? Is it going to fail?
Yeah.
Because when you and I were doing it, I still had that feeling, but there's always somebody who could rescue you. You get to a point like, oh crap, I don't have anything else to say. And then someone comes in and says something, and then you respond and you're back out.
Right.
With me, by myself, if I fall, I fall.
There you go. Bye.
It's over.
Bye, Rick.
So there's a feeling, there's kind of a stand-up sort of feel about it. There's a little bit of improv feel about it. And I like that. Is it something for everyone? I haven't decided yet. I don't know what the value is. I hope that there's some value. I hope people get something out of it. Here's something that I hope that they might get. So let me talk about two things.
Okay, let's talk about
I want to talk about something very interesting and one that's very sobering. The interesting thing, so we went, I went to Minneapolis recently, a couple weeks ago, a little vacation. And I mentioned this, I think, on my podcast last week. I kind of mentioned it, but I want to kind of go into a little more on it. So my wife's dad was an artist. Mm-hmm. And I think we've talked on the podcast about his history and how he met his demise, which is tragic. But his best friend, they used to share a studio together. And his best friend, they used to create together and make stuff together. And so his best friend, I think his best friend came from Mexico. His name was Eduardo.
Okay.
And Eduardo is my wife, Maria's godfather now.
Godfather. Mm-hmm.
So I got to meet him. I've never met him before. I've heard a lot about him. And so I got to meet him. So I go to his house. And this is what I was talking about last week on the show. It's just like a museum. Have you ever been to you go, now he's in his 80s now. I don't mean it as disrespect if I say old person, but an older person, because I'm getting close.
You're getting close.
I'm almost there.
Yeah.
But when you go sometimes to an older person's house and it's like a museum, it's like, holy crap, look at all of this stuff in here. Mm-hmm. Where did they get this stuff? So he's an artist. He creates all day long. He lives by himself as well, just like you.
Okay.
Maybe you two could get together. all day long, he creates. He does art all day long. He has 30 volumes of a book that he creates himself by putting every day. He just draws, put them in the book, put it in the book. And it's like a photo album, but it's just like that thick. And what is it, 4 inches, 3 inches?
Yeah.
I don't know, guys, it's always bigger for a guy.
That's right.
I'm going to say 3 to 4 inches.
Okay.
And he's got 30 volumes of those. He just keeps putting art in there. He has art all over his walls. There's not wall space in his house. He has books everywhere.
Wow.
Everywhere's books.
Wow.
Art supplies everywhere. Desks with art everywhere. Paintings he's just starting on. It's just like a museum. It's so amazing. And the man just lives by himself with his dog. And you go in and he's got art from like established artists, well-known artists. He's like, this is this person, this is it. And he knows who the artists are. He's got a lot of stuff by Maria's dad hanging up on his wall, originals. Mm-hmm. And then, so this is great. So the studio upstairs in his house is is his studio, and then the main floor is where he lives. But there's art everywhere. And
right.
He took around and he's doing 3D art, so it just looks, there's sculpture everywhere. And then you go downstairs into what he calls his train room. He's into trains.
Electric trains?
You have never seen anything like this.
Oh, okay.
He's been in magazines. I don't know where he gets the time to make this. So he's got 2 rooms with these huge villages that he's built out of miniature and trains that run through. I'll show you pictures in a minute. But it's just your jaw drops open. You're like, what? But he's been featured in train magazines because it's amazing.
So let me ask you this. Are the pieces, the little miniatures and stuff, store-bought, or does he actually make them?
A little of both.
Okay.
But he's kind of, I don't know if I should use the word. I want to say kind of a savant in that he's just, I have a couple of friends. So I'm an artist, but I like to come up for air every once in a while.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I want to watch a little TV.
Sure.
I want to have a sandwich. I want to go for a walk.
Right.
But there are some artists, they'll do this for a while. So I have an artist friend who, so she paints, and then she'll paint her couch, and then she goes to Goodwill and buys shoes, and she paints the shoes and her jackets, and she makes earrings. She makes her own yogurt, her own coffee. She goes gardening, and she doesn't stop. When do you have time to do this? How can you be an artist where you don't ever do anything but just art, make stuff? That's kind of an obsession, don't you think?
I don't think it's obsessive. I think it's just who that person is. For instance, for them, like this person that you barely just told me about, for her, it could be that taking a break from painting to go to the garden is taking her breath.
I'm sure
that could be her rest. That could be her brain time, her just chill out time. That could be her downtime. That could be her decompression, whatever you want to call it. And that could be for her. But to you, it looks like she's just going and going and going. But, maybe she is stopping inside when she goes and does gardening.
I guess I went to her house once, and it was just like Eduardo was. It's like she's like, here's all my art, and there's art everywhere. And then so you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then you go, okay. And then you leave the art space, and then you look in the living room, and you're like, where do you get this? She's like, oh, I made that. I did this. I bought this at Goodwill, and I painted it. Here's my couch. Have a seat. I painted that whole thing on my couch. Let me get you some coffee that I made. I made yogurt. Well, okay. When did you have time to make any of your art? I just don't. I wish I was like that. That's not in any way a negative thing. To me, it's amazing that people.
Amazing.
And so to see this person, to see his house where he just doesn't stop doing art, and that's my goal. I just want to not stop doing art. I enjoy that, but I only want to paint or draw. How do you have time to do trains and yogurt? I don't know where that gets fit in to everything else. But I love it. It's amazing. And whenever you're lucky enough to go to someone's house like that, and where you're stepping inside a museum, like a time capsule.
Almost, yeah.
And it's like, oh, wow. And then the tragedy, because I've seen this too, when the tragedy is when that person passes away, all that stuff kind of gets diversified, know? It gets like Maria's dad's stuff is like here and there, and we got a few pieces in there. And then when we're gone, it's going to go, and then eventually it goes in the Goodwill or junk pile or whatever.
Yeah.
Art is so temporary unless you're Picasso or Basquiat. It's just like you just get it for a little while.
Yeah.
And then it belongs to someone else.
Somewhere else.
But anyway, I just want to say that living alone's not always a bad thing. I've always kind of enjoyed alone time. I love where I am now. Not saying I would like to go back.
Right.
I get my alone time in here. See?
This is your alone space.
Yeah. But you could be that way. I think you are. I was at your house not too long. You got your stuff. You do your things. You do art, and you can still do more art, and you write sometimes. Whatever you decide to do, you can do it because you're the boss of your own life. You don't have to run anything past.
Right. I'm not
else.
Responsible for anybody else's space or feelings.
Like my wife and I talk about not having kids. It's like we can do what we want, go where we want. We don't have to run it past the kids, but we have to run it past each other. You don't have to do that.
I don't even have to do that.
You do whatever you want to do.
I just get in my car and go.
Today, I'm going to be naked in my house all day long.
That's right.
And you can.
And I can. And I can even go downstairs into my garage naked. Even though my landlord can get into that garage, I've already explained to them if they walk in and see me bent over in the dryer, butt naked, that's on them.
Yeah. Please, just put up a warning sign or something. Shoot up a flare, a nude flare. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about is just some interesting things. This is something I like to kind kind of like a public service announcement.
Okay.
Recommendation or whatever. So I'm into podcasts, as you know, not just doing one. I like to listen to podcast stuff. And I'm also really big into documentaries.
Correct.
Love documentaries, my favorite kind of movie. So when we went to Minnesota, we listened to a documentary or a podcast that I have to talk about. I don't like serial podcasts and I don't like serial documentaries. I don't generally, I want to watch one and then it's over. But the trend now is to have like 5-part documentary
series. Yes.
I don't like it.
I do.
I know young people do. I'm old and set in my ways.
No one said I was young.
Documentaries should be one episode.
Okay.
And I've watched 6-part documentaries before, and I thought that could have been one. They had to stretch it out.
Yeah, me too.
We watched the documentary about the what's the Gold River Killer or whatever. I don't know the name. The guy that they just found out up in Long Island or something like that.
Yeah.
And we watched the documentary. It was they just stretched it out. It got so thin, it wasn't even, I was like, really? You could have had an interesting documentary if you just put it in one, put all that information in one, but they had to stretch it out. So that happens a lot.
Yes.
And that's one reason why I don't like them. Now, I've heard a few. So I listen to Case File, which is a true crime podcast. And occasionally they'll do Continued next week. Sometimes they'll do 3. That's too much for me.
That's too much for you. Okay.
But a lot of times it's like, okay, well, that was interesting. Okay. So my wife likes all of that kind of stuff. She'll listen to 20 episodes. She doesn't care. So she was in charge of programming the podcast when we went to Minnesota. And she put on a podcast called Bone Valley.
Bone Valley.
Yes. And it was 9 episodes. And I was like, really? You're going to make me listen to? No, I don't want to do this. And she was like, well, that's what we're going to listen to.
If you give her the responsibility of being in charge of the podcasts, you better be ready.
So I was wrong. 9 episodes weren't even enough. That was one of the most interesting podcasts I've ever heard.
Really?
It's about a specific case. And I don't want to go into a spoiler thing. I don't want to talk about because it's kind of been resolved now. In fact, the weird thing is it actually was resolved like a week before we listened to it.
Oh, wow. So it was very recent.
Very fresh. But the case itself started in the 80s.
Okay.
So it takes you all the way from the beginning until like last month.
Wow.
And I know about this. I know stories about this, but I have never actually like really listened to this kind of bad investigation, corrupt cops, and corrupt attorneys, and bad luck from somebody. And all I'm going to say, this is not real. I wouldn't say this is a spoiler because you can find this anywhere. But it basically stole almost 40 years of a person's life because of that irresponsibility
of the
authorities.
The authorities, everybody.
Yeah.
Wow.
Someone lost 40 years of their life. And they would have lost more if it hadn't been for a few people who said, this is wrong, let's fix it.
Yeah.
And so that story, let me set it up just to make it interesting. I'm not gonna
because I'm just thinking like right now, like I'm gonna turn 50 this year.
Yeah.
So that would be almost my entire life.
This was a kid.
Yeah.
A young kid whose wife was supposed to come and pick him up.
Okay.
And she didn't show up.
Okay.
And he called to try to find her.
Okay.
And he couldn't find her. And decided, where's my wife? And he goes out to try to look for her. Can't find her. And he's getting terrified now.
Of course.
And he calls the cops. And he says, my wife's supposed to show up. She's not here. I can't find her. Can I have help? I believe within 24 hours, they end up finding her body.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
So very, very soon after she's reported missing.
That's the story.
Okay.
How it gets turned around, flipped, corrupted, and an innocent person. Should I say innocent? Is that a spoiler? I don't know if that's a spoiler or not. But anyway, someone spends almost 40 years of their life being locked up for this. And the question is, did this person do it? And if this person didn't, who did? What's going on? What's the story?
Right.
Why is this person locked up? And that's the story. And let me just tell you, Bone Valley, there's not, I think Leo Schofield is the person.
Oh, okay.
It's the story of Leo. Just listen to it. It's worth 9 episodes.
All right. I will listen to it. Sounds good.
Now, I'm throwing that out for everyone to consume. And then here's the other one. So this one I watched the other day. Now, I had seen this story on Dateline before. In fact, I saw it like a week before I actually saw the documentary. But there's a story on Dateline. Now, there's a documentary called American Nightmare. It's on Netflix. It's worth the watch. It is also, I believe it's 3 episodes. Now, I can handle 3.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, it's about a woman who was kidnapped. Mm-hmm. A young woman who was kidnapped under a very bizarre situation.
Okay.
Circumstances. And the cops didn't believe her or her boyfriend. And basically tried to frame them for it.
Tried to frame them for her kidnapping?
Know if framing is the word. Let's just say blaming, not necessarily framing.
Okay.
But they didn't believe them. And so the Dateline story it tells it all out in an episode of Dateline, which is an hour. And and you're like, wow, that's so weird. But then now this documentary about that same episode, which is on Netflix, 3 episodes, and it goes into details. Holy crap. It's the same situation. I mean, we're talking incompetent investigators, incompetent cops, corrupt cops, purposely looking the other way, they know what's going on, even when they know the truth about something. So just as an example, cops in another county found out information and they try to share it with the cops and the FBI, and they try to get rid of it. The
FBI even tried to get rid of it.
Totally.
Because they didn't want to be wrong.
They don't want to be wrong. They don't want to have to face the facts that they were wrong.
Interesting.
And these kids, because they were young kids, and this girl who was kidnapped and raped and other things, they keep saying, we kept waiting for someone to come in and help us. And the people who are supposed to help you become the people who are actually against you
and blaming you for something.
It's horrible.
That's awful.
But watch the documentary. It's well worth it. Both of those. Listen to that podcast, Bone Valley, and then the documentary American Nightmare, which is on Netflix.
Okay.
Same kind of thing. It's both of them are infuriating. You just want to, I don't know, you just want to be mad. And the thing is, most cops aren't like that. Most cops try to do their job. They're trying to do what they're supposed to do. But if you get into a community of cops, a county or a city or state where there's corruption, good luck. You're not getting out of it.
Yeah.
And the podcast, the 9-episode podcast, when you keep seeing like every option for help or turning or to get out of this, and when you start seeing how the little arm comes down, like, nope, you can't go this way.
Can't go this way.
And because you always think, well, if something bad happened to me, I can always go to the cops. I can always and then you realize that your worst enemies are the people who are supposed to help you.
Yeah.
Whew.
That's scary.
Where do you go? What do you do? That's
scary. And you can go back in history into entire communities of people, entire races even.
Yeah.
Who were supposed to have those very same rights and were supposed to be able to go to these people for help. and we're not able to do so.
I mean, we all know that. How many times have you heard stories about how someone was framed just because of the color of their skin? Mm-hmm. And they never got out of prison. Mm-mm. They never had anybody help them. Mm-mm. Sometimes they were executed. Mm-hmm. And then later it's like, oops.
Yeah.
DNA test says they didn't even do it.
Yeah.
Like, well, they said they didn't even do it. But how do you make up for that?
Well, you can go back to the 1600s and the freaking witch hunts.
Yeah.
You know, women and men were murdered.
Yeah.
For supposedly performing witchcraft, mm-hmm. and then years later, they finally said, "Oh yeah, we're sorry."
You're killed for somebody else's superstitions. There's nothing
right.
I won't say there's nothing worse, but one of the worst thing is to have to be subjugated to someone else's superstitions or visions or beliefs. Mm-hmm. I killed you because I believed that the volcanic god needed I mean, think about how many people were thrown into a volcano to appease the god that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Anyway, I want to throw that out. I want to give that recommendation to people. That's all I got to say.
All right. Well, thank you for the recommendation. I will try and check those out.
All right. We're at a 1 minute. I mean, 1 hour. 1 hour, not 1 minute.
It's been more than a minute.
People wished it was.
It's been a hot minute.
It's an hour. So I guess we could say goodbye, right?
Yeah.
It's like 100. That's 100.
Nah, there you go.
Thanks for being on the podcast. I'm glad we got to do at least one more.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe one day we could do another one.
Maybe. 200. We'll see.
How many episodes? Do you remember how many episodes we did of ours? I know we did
over 400.
We did 100. I remember 100 when we got to 100. That was a big deal.
Was it?
It was kind of fun. It was like marking. We're out of the double digits and we're into the triple digits.
Gosh, that must have been years ago. I don't remember at all.
I don't remember all of the stuff.
No.
But this one I do know I'm at 100. So I'm happy with that.
Good for you.
Yeah. And thanks for being a part of it.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Is that it? Is that all I'm going to say? Hey,
I don't know.
If you like the podcast, if you like this episode, that's fine. Leave a message. Tell me that you liked it on the Outta Toon Podcast Facebook, or send me a message through what do they call that thing? The email. That email thing that the kids are doing.
That email thing.
Send me an email, rick@outtoon.com. Facebook is a good place to let me know if you liked the podcast, if you liked the episode, if you liked my guest. Just let me know, okay? And then the listener line, 678-348-0008. You're welcome to call in.
Thanks for listening.
All right.
Okay.
Did you have fun?
I did.
It is kind of fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Come back at 200.
Okay.
That'll be fun. We'll have a good time.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you next time. Monday. I'm going to try to keep it every Monday. All right. Here we go.